God, there's a video, sorry. And that Jesus is good news, you know what I mean? All right, one healer. This is a good day. This is a good morning. I'm going to actually do an exercise with you guys, maybe 2 exercises. That means it's everybody's participation, everybody in the courtyard too. I can see you through the window, so you guys are also on the hook. But I want to see everybody kind of stand up real briefly for a moment. Go ahead, stand. I know, it's already getting awkward, right? It's already getting awkward. Now it's going to even get more awkward. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but just bear with me. I want you to now stare at somebody. I know, here we go. You better buckle up. Now, you know, this is the easy part. Just give somebody like Knuckles a high five or a handshake. That's all you got to do. You don't even have to say anything. Just give somebody Knuckles, pound them, handshake, high five. There you go. Now, here's exercise number 2. I want you guys to take your arms, put them out like this. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that to you guys. Some of you guys are going, I'm out of here, dude. I'm going out that door. I'm never coming back. I would not do that to you guys. Go ahead and sit back down. But hey, I want to know, did anybody hug each other here this morning? Who was that? Who did? Who did? There you go. For making yourself uncomfortable, there you go. It is my favorite drink from Starbucks. Not that it's a Starbucks push, but it's the salted caramel cold brew, extra foam, extra caramel. If you don't like it, that's your one and only right there, okay? Oh, I'm just going to hug everybody. That's good. Okay. Touch is a powerful thing. Sometimes it can make us very awkward. Other times you feel really good about it, right? I mean, you love a authentic, really nice, intimate embrace from someone who is special, right? There are articles that have been written, there are studies that have been done about what happens maybe to infants and babies that are not given this touch. And we know that it's devastating. But it's not just devastating just to infants. Even when we get older as adults, it's important that we need the touch as well. I don't know, if the older you get, the more you want to touch. I don't know. But I hear that it's true. It's also important. And right now, I know some couples are probably grabbing each other's hands. They're probably poking each other. And that's what touch is, right? Sometimes it's just that reaffirming moment that says, you know what, I love you. We're together. I see the brothers and the cousins doing that right now in the middle. Hey, that's good. I know you guys are going to miss each other as you guys go off to college tomorrow. I know. Hey, but I love you, bro, right? Is that what you're doing, Nicholas? Yeah, okay. And I know, like, for me and my wife, you know, sometimes we've got this touch. It's called 1-4-3. You guys probably have heard of that. 1 tap I, 4 taps 4, 3 taps 3. I love you, right? And I'm just tapping that on her leg or on her arm if I'm holding her hand, that kind of stuff. And usually when I'm in church and I'm bored. No, not true. But sometimes when I'm just sitting there and I'm not allowed to talk, it says 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's a love language sometimes, right? The way we touch one another. Well, today's passage in Mark chapter 5, I'm going to be covering 2 stories. This is where your notes come in. I know I'm getting right into it real fast. 2 stories, 2 women, 2 touches, and 2 miracles. We're going to cover 2 stories, 2 women, 2 touches, and 2 miracles. And this is going to be a passage where it's a story inside of a story. And we're also going to see that there's a miracle inside of a miracle within a miracle. And as I was talking with Ron in his office about this, and as we were dialoguing, he was like, yeah, the greater miracle was yet to come, the resurrection from the dead, right? And I was like, no, there's a miracle within that miracle even. And so you'll find out what the miracle within the miracle is. If you want to write that in your notes, go ahead. I didn't put that in there for you. It came later. There's a miracle within your miracle. Actually, if you got your Bible, go ahead and write that in there. There's a miracle within a miracle within a miracle. Amen. And amen. That's just something to get excited about. And these events and these encounters, we're going to find them in Mark chapter 4 and Mark chapter 5. And it's just loaded with like impossible cases. I mean, it's loaded with things like Jesus is going to encounter a demon-possessed man. Jesus is going to encounter a diseased woman on the verge of death. And Jesus is going to encounter a dead girl. Now, that's just like a lot to come into Ron's office in one day, if you can imagine. It's like, whoa, That was crazy. You should have seen or heard about the day that I had, right? There was a demon-possessed person, there was a diseased woman on the verge of death, and somebody died, and they all came to my office, and I had to perform miracles, I had to pray, or whatever it is, right? But all three of these cases, they were impossible in Jesus' day just as much as they are in our day today. And this brief section of Mark is going to put the power of Jesus on display. And as you're reading, it's going to be like, wow, this is God. He has finally come. He's going to put his power over demons. He's going to show his power over disease. He's going to show his power over death. And in the previous chapter, chapter 4, he's going to show his power over creation, that even the winds and the waves are going to obey him. There is such power in Jesus, and it's amazing. But you know what? All of this stuff that happened to him was just another day in the life of Jesus. Just another day. This wasn't too much for him to handle. He can handle it all. Do you guys know that, church? He can handle it all. There's nothing too big for him. And so a day in the life of Jesus, I'm going to set a demon-possessed man free. There's a woman with a disease, I'm going to heal her. She's going to be free. There's going to be a dead one. I'm going to raise her from the dead. She's going to come back to life. Not a big deal for Jesus. He has the power. He has the authority. It's not too much for him. Some of you guys are carrying things. You're thinking, well, maybe what I've got may be too much. Let me tell you, church, what you have going on is not too big for God. Amen. He can take it. This is how the story begins, verse 21. Jesus raises a dead girl, and he heals a sick woman. Automatically, I'm interested. You're like, wow, okay, let's go. So when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, notice that word again. So Jesus has been doing this a couple of times, I guess. So when he again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. So what happened before this? If he's back and now there's this crowd, what happened before this? Well, in chapter 4, we find that Jesus was teaching to a large crowd. He was teaching them a bunch of the parables, and they were just drawn around him. They loved what he had to say. They were really interested, but they loved the miracles that he was performing as well. And so he just drew this crowd, and they just kept following him and following him. And we're not just talking about hundreds. We're talking about into the thousands, if not the tens of thousands. The crowds were following Jesus. And Jesus finally says to his disciples, hey, you know what? Let's go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Let's go to the other side of this lake, right? And so he does. He goes to the other side of the lake, and while he does that, this was last week's sermon, there's that massive storm, and the disciples are in the boat, and they're going, what's going to happen? We're going to die. And they wake up Jesus, like, don't you care, Jesus, that we're going to die right now? And you're just sleeping here. And then Jesus just calms the storm, right? The waves and the wind, they're just calm. And it says that the disciples were like terrified, no longer of the storm, but of the God that was in the boat with them. And they're like, man, who is this? That even the winds and the waves obey him. And so they're on the sea right now, and then they finally make it to the other side, and that's where Jesus encounters the demon-possessed guy. And so he's there with the demon-possessed guy, and he sets him free of all of his torment, right? And those demons, he drives into the pigs go off the cliff in it's a short form, right? And they drown. And then the people find out about it, and they're not happy about that. They're actually upset. And so they go to Jesus and they say, leave. We don't want you here. Get out of our country. Complete opposite of what the other side of the sea was saying. The other side of the sea was like, they can't get enough of Jesus. And Jesus performs a miracle over here with a demon-possessed guy. And they're like, please get out of here. We don't want you here. And so Jesus gets back in the boat, and that's where he picked up. And he gets in the boat again. He goes back to the northern part of the Sea of Galilee, which is like a 6-mile kind of journey. And he arrives, and in the account of Luke says, the crowd was waiting for Jesus. You're like, what? There's already a large crowd. They never left. They were waiting for Jesus to come back. I'm like, how long did that take? A day? A week? They didn't care. They were going to wait for Jesus to come back because they wanted more. They had this anticipation. Do you guys ever feel that way? Like, I just want more of Jesus. I just need to see him again and again and again. That was the hunger and the thirst of the crowd. They could not get enough of him. And so they waited for his boat. Can you imagine just sitting there, 1,000, 10,000 of them? The boat, there it is. Jesus has returned. And in the midst of this massive crowd in the story, 2 people stand out. One's a man and one's a woman. One is rich and one is poor. One is respected while the other one is rejected. You know who I'm talking about? You guys know the story? One is extremely honored in the sight of a lot of people, and the other one is just ashamed about how her life is going. One is the leader of a synagogue, a ruler, and the other one's not even allowed to be in the synagogue. She is like excommunicated. People on the completely different sides of the fence are now entering into the story with Jesus. Verse 2, well, the second verse, I should say, verse 22. Mark 5:22, then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. Notice that, he fell. And then he pleaded, number 2, he pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. And if you have a pen, just underline this. And so Jesus went with him. I think that's important to note there. So Jesus went with him. One of the things that we see is that Jesus is always accessible. Sometimes we don't know that, church, but Jesus wants you to know that he is always accessible. You can always go to him. He's never going to be too busy for you, right? Jesus met people where they were. He met them in the market. He met them at the well. He met them at the lake. He met them at their house, right? Jesus will meet you where you're at. He is always going to be accessible to you. And Jairus, man, this guy is kind of a big deal. I mean, the people know who he is. He's dressed a certain way, but he's known in his community. He's wealthy. He's a man of influence. He's the leader of the synagogue, right? And notice these two things. He falls at the feet of Jesus, and he pleads with him. That means he didn't just say it once. He says it over and over and over again, and he pleads with Jesus at his feet. You can just see what this picture looks like. A very important person bowing at the feet of Jesus, and he's pleading with him. Totally out of character for a synagogue leader, especially in the time where the rulers of that time wanted to kill Jesus. So here is a synagogue leader going against what all of his friends and all of his leaders would want to do. And he falls at the feet of Jesus, where the others want to kill him and crucify him and get rid of him. This synagogue leader sees something different. He sees Jesus as somebody good, as a healer, as a teacher, somebody remarkable. And that posture of Jesus just falling down on his knees at Jesus' feet, it shows that he has humility, that he recognized there's somebody greater than himself before him. He wouldn't normally do this in any other circumstance, but that's what he does. He bows himself at the feet of Jesus. He can't get any lower and more humble than that. So he shows humility. He also is showing his great need that he's got. He's extremely desperate at this moment. He's desperate for an answer from God for his daughter who's on the verge of dying. Obviously, she's near the end. He's exhausted everything that he can think of, but he still has Jesus. And he knows that Jesus is able to do this. It also shows some faith, because he says, if you would just touch her, she'll be healed. It demonstrates faith that he's got. I mean, for Jairus, he knows it's all out of his hands. There's nothing that I can do that's going to change the situation here. My daughter's health is what it is. And no amount of money, no amount of influence that I have is going to change that. And so he's got one option. He went to look for the only hope that he knows for his daughter. And where's that, church? It's Jesus. Jesus is good news. It's like Brian Sexauer. I think that's one of his favorite lines. Jesus is good news. Hallelujah, you know? Jesus is good news. Jairus has heard of him. And Jairus has probably even seen him as well. Because remember when Jesus was teaching in the synagogue, and it was so packed, it's probably like, hey, we got to get a speaker today. And everybody shows up, right? And more, so that they're like all outside, and they're having to rip through the roof and drop a friend through the roof. This was in the synagogue, just so that he could be near Jesus, so Jesus could perform a healing. And Jairus was probably the ruler of that synagogue, most likely. And he's seeing what Jesus is saying. I mean, he's seeing what Jesus is doing, and he's hearing everything that Jesus is saying too. And so in the back of his mind, he knows there's something different and special about this guy. And now he needs him for his daughter. So he's seeing Jesus. He's heard Jesus. And he goes, you know what? I have to go to him. I've got this agonizing thing in my heart that's driving me to the feet of Jesus. Sometimes it is pain, and sometimes it is trouble, and it is suffering that drives us to our knees into Jesus' feet. And that is what's happening here with Jairus. So Jesus is always accessible. But the second thing that we see about Jesus here is that Jesus is always available. Something that we don't really excel at that well. Being very accessible and being very available. Jesus was available to give of his very life, his very self. Jesus was giving his time, his energy, and his efforts. Jesus was not going to hold anything back. Jesus was always available. Church, you need to hear that. He's accessible to you, and he is available to you. Whatever it is that you need in your marriage, in your family, in your health, in your finances, Jesus is accessible, and Jesus is available. We see that because in verse 24 it says that Jesus went off with him. Now remember, he is in a massive crowd. The crowd's so big that one account says that they're actually crushing Jesus. I mean, imagine Jesus being bigger than the Beatles. And the Beatles, they were just going crazy for the Beatles, right? And they're yelling, they're screaming, and clamoring. Well, imagine Jesus in the height of his day, right? And it's just like tens of thousands of people are crowding around him, and they're crushing on him. And Jesus became available to one man at that moment. That's kind of a special picture to see there. Some of us would say, you know what, I'm kind of busy right now. You know, I've got a lot of things going on. But Jesus says, you know what, I'm going to go with you. He shows himself as being extremely available. Jairus must have been jacked. Can you imagine? Like he was thinking, I'm going to go to Jesus. He is my last and only hope, but I believe he can do this. And when Jesus says, yes, I'm going to go to your house, he must have been like, what? He must have been excited beyond belief. Why? Because Jesus is coming to my house today. My daughter's going to be healed. My daughter's not going to die. She's going to live. There's nothing more important to Jairus than this very moment when Jesus says, yes, I'm going to your house. I mean, if there was a happy dance, I mean, this is not mine. I don't have one. But Jairus was probably doing a happy dance, right? He was so excited. Hey, Jesus is going. My daughter's going to live. Nothing else matters. But on the way to Jairus' house, there's an interruption, right? This is the miracle inside of the miracle. Another miracle is about to take place. So the third thing that we see is that Jesus is always interruptible. I mean, I'm not very good at this, people interrupting me. So I try to be good at this, but I'm not very good at it. But ask anyone in the office, I'm pretty good at interrupting other people. I can shut you down in the middle of a conversation fast, like, bite my tongue. Not very often. But you know what? I'm really good at helping you being interrupted. But I need to work on me being interrupted. But we're on our way to a miracle inside of a miracle. And now I'm going to say inside of a miracle. This is what it says in Mark 5:24. And a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and she spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his cloak. Because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Immediately. 12 years this woman had to suffer. She suffered for 12 years. She could never be clean. Never. What did that mean, that she would never be clean? It meant that under the biblical regulations in the book of Leviticus, it means that she would never be able to go to the synagogue. It meant that she would never be able to go to the temple. It meant that if she touched her husband, if she had a husband, he was going to be unclean. If she touched her children, they were going to be unclean. If she touched her friends, they were going to be unclean. Which meant this: for 12 years, no one touched her. No one hugged her. That's why I made you do that thing. It's like, hey, no, I'm not going to make you do it. At least do a little knuckle bump, right? But the thing is for 12 years, she was in isolation, had no income, and had no relationship. She was unclean and completely put off. The book of Luke says that she was actually incurable. There was nothing that was going to change her circumstance. But notice what she says, or notice what she does. She's like, well, I'm not stopping there. I'm not taking the doctor's word for this. I'm not just going to lay in my bed and die, right? She says, you know what? I've heard of this Jesus. I've heard of his healing power. She goes, and I believe it. I believe it. So what does she do? This is crazy to me. She goes against the boundaries of rules and regulation. She goes against the rules and the things set in place in the book of Leviticus, you know, like Jewish tradition of what's going to happen if you go into a crowd. She says, I don't care what the Old Testament has to say, so to speak, right? I am going to go into the crowd, and I know I'm going to make people unclean when I do this. I am making that decision to defile people and make them unclean. I know I'm going to rub shoulders with them. I know I'm going to bump into them. How many? 10? 50? 100? I don't know, but I'm going to do it, she says. And I'm not just going to make people unclean. I'm going to touch the teacher. I'm going to touch Jesus, and I know when I do that, I'm going to make him unclean as well. Can you imagine the thought process that must have been going through her mind? Should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I touch Jesus? But this is my only chance. This is my healing. I know he can do this. I must do this. I have to do this. And I'm not just going to touch him. That word touch says, I'm going to grab him. I'm going to hold on to his garments, and I'm not going to let go. I mean, it's like, woo! You know, have you ever gone for a ride and you're holding on to a rope and you're just like going? I think that's called skiing, but whatever. And she's just going with it, and she just holds on for the ride. And she's just not going to let go. I am going to be well. I'm going to get healed. There was no lack of faith in this woman when you see this picture. She is grabbing onto Jesus. I'm glad that somebody is here this morning because I got a question for this guy as well as everybody else. Have you ever been somewhere that you don't belong? Have you ever been somewhere where you know you're not invited? Like, for example, have you ever gone on a vacation and you snuck into like a resort because you want to use their pool? Or you want to just play on their slide and jump into their hot tub? Have you ever been that person? Honestly, raise your hand. Okay. Not on me. Well, that's kind of what she did. She snuck into a place that she shouldn't have been. And I know for like some people, when you sneak into a place that you don't belong, all coolness leaves your body. I mean, every ounce of it that you thought you had is gone. All of a sudden, you look guilty, you look paranoid, you're looking around, you're letting the whole world know that you don't belong, you're acting goofy, you know? And so when I'm with people like that, I try to stay away. Like, I don't want to get kicked out of here. And so what happens? You fool around more than you should in this pool, you know, and eventually somebody's going to complain. And then the security comes to you like, hey, you mean out of hundreds of people, out of 1,000 people, I look like I don't belong? You're right, I don't belong. And so we grab our towels and we leave. That was Hawaii. Okay, there we go. Mark chapter 5, verse 30. We're going to see that she didn't belong there. And Jesus is calling her out. Jesus is going to say, hey, who touched me? She couldn't just slip away quietly. This is the part where I say this is the miracle inside of the miracle. Verse 30, once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, he turned around in the crowd and he asked, who touched my clothes, right? Who touched me? Who grabbed hold of me? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, who touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Who did this? Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be free from your suffering. You see, she got her healing. She'd already got that. She got her healing. Her bleeding stopped, and her physical, this is the part I want to emphasize, her physical problem was solved. How many guys know, church, that we need more than just a physical healing? Amen. Yes. Sometimes that's what we look for more than anything else. We need a whole lot more than just a physical healing. She got what she came for. She was healed. But Jesus says, hey, who touched me? Who touched my garment? He didn't ask the question for information, but he asked that question to draw her out and to draw her to himself. He wanted to lock eyes with her, and he wanted to talk to her. Because you see, Jesus came to seek and to save, right? And right here, right now in this moment, Jesus is pursuing her. In the middle of a huge crowd of maybe 10,000 people, on his way to Jairus' house, he's interrupted by a woman who grabs a hold of him, and he says, who are you? And he wants to lock in with her. He's pursuing her. Who touched me? He's being crushed by the crowds. Seems like a ridiculous question. Nobody gets this. Who's that? But Jesus knows that there's something more, that there's a greater miracle to come. There's something greater that he wants to do. And only two people knew what happened. Jesus knew what happened, and the woman knew what happened. Nobody else knew. They're like, touch you? What are you talking about? You know? But the woman knew, right? And Jesus knew. She doesn't know why Jesus is calling her out. It's like, what is he going to do? Shame me in front of everybody? Is he going to take the healing away from me? She doesn't know why Jesus is calling her out. But Jesus right now is calling her out. She can still slip away, right? She can still walk away and say, you know what? I've got my healing. I got what I came for. I'm not going to lose this, right? She still had that option. But Jesus is calling her out. And she knows right now she is in the presence of someone great. She's not just in the presence of another teacher, not in the presence of another synagogue ruler. She's in the presence of someone great. She's in the presence of God, and she knows this. Right here, right now, in that moment. This is not human embarrassment that she's dealing with. She's dealt with that for 12 years. What she's dealing with right now is what I think is called holy fear. God is here, and he's healed me. I touched him, right? That's where she's at. It's like Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah said, oh man, woe is me. I am a man of unclean lips. I saw the Lord. And he says that he just fell down on his face and he was annihilated. And he was just destroyed in that moment because he saw God. Just like we saw in the chapter before, in Mark chapter 4, that when the disciples saw what Jesus did and he calmed the winds and the wave, they were terrified in the boat. Who is this guy? I mean, we've been walking with him. We saw these miracles. But now, who is this guy, right? And they were terrified. They were more terrified of Jesus in the boat than they were when they were just almost ready to die in the wind and the waves, right? They were more terrified of Jesus than dying by drowning. And so this woman right here, she collapses, it says, and she is in fear and trembling. She is fully aware that she is a sinner in the presence of God. She is fully aware that God has just touched her life. She is fully aware that God is now calling her out. And what does she do? She falls to her face. She's at his knees, and she just tells Jesus in front of everybody her confession. She just says everything. Jesus does that. In his presence, you just confess it all, like, oh, I'm so not worthy. Or, oh, Jesus. And you just begin to spew it all out. And everybody heard what she had to say. And the ending to the story, the ending of this miracle, is more powerful than the healing itself. God's response was, daughter, your faith has healed you. How many of you guys are longing for that word this morning? Daughter, your faith has healed you. Son, your faith has healed you. Whatever that internal suffering or physical suffering that you're going through, Jesus is saying, daughter, son, your faith has healed you. Scholars tell us that this term is one of the most intimate endearments. And it says here that it's recorded that this is the only person that Jesus has ever referred to as daughter by their name. Daughter, you're forgiven. Your faith has healed you. Not you're forgiven. Your faith has healed you. The girl that nobody wanted, the girl that nobody would touch, is now being embraced. And she's precious to God. Church, you know that's you too. You are being embraced by him and you're precious to him no matter what it is that you're thinking. That word healed in the Greek is sozo, which means to save. It's that word in the Bible that says salvation. Jesus is saying this, daughter, your faith has saved you. That's the greater miracle. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Now go in peace. See, she came for a healing, and she left with so much more. What did Jesus do? Man, he restored her. Restored her back to family, restored her back to community, restored her back to society, right? Where before she wasn't allowed to be in anybody's presence, she was completely isolated. Now she is restored because she is now healed. She is no longer unclean. She is now clean. And God gave her identity. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Your faith has saved you. He gives her identity. She has family now. Now, while all this is going on, this is a powerful story. You're seeing all this unravel. You see all this happen. And there's the crowds there. And they're on their way to Jairus' house as well. Messengers come. And they don't have a good news, do they? We pick up in the story in verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue, the leader. And they said to him, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" Man, sometimes we hear that in our own thoughts, don't we? Why do we even bother going to Jesus? My circumstances are never going to change. He's never going to answer my prayer. Don't listen to those thoughts. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. That's what Jesus wants to change your thoughts to. Don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. And he went in and he said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And not because it was a joke and they thought it was funny, because they were mocking Jesus and they were scorning him, right? Here Jesus just performed a crazy miracle, and he's at Jairus' house, and now they're mocking him, and they're scorning him, and they're laughing at him. So Jesus put them all out. Forget it. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and his disciples who were with him, and he went into where the child was. And he took her by the hand and said to her, I'm going to butcher this, unless Ron wants to say it, Talitha koum. Pretty close. Okay, good. Which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, and at this they were completely astonished. The worst thing happens. While Jesus has been interrupted, and he's talking with this woman, Jairus' daughter dies. And I wonder if during those moments, what Jairus must have been going through before he learned that, like, Jesus, we got to go. Dude, Jesus, she's on her deathbed. She's on the verge of dying. We've got to go. We don't have time for this. And I wonder if he says any of this out loud, or is that just screaming through his head? Because I know that's what was screaming through my head. Jesus, we got to go now, before it's too late. Don't you guys feel that anxiety that Jairus must have been going through? My daughter's going to die. I came to you because it's any moment now. You got to come with me. It's not recorded that he ever said that to Jesus, but we know as humans, we must be thinking that way. I need you and I need you now. But now comes Jairus' greatest test of faith. When his friends come and the messengers come and say, why bother the teacher? You know how many miracles probably stopped at somebody saying, or your thoughts saying, why bother the teacher? Why bother going to Jesus anymore? He's not going to answer my prayer. I've been praying for years, been praying for days, weeks, months. I don't know how long your prayer's been going up for, but you've probably been thinking, why bother? If you hear Jesus is going to say to you, stop fearing and start believing. Because with Jesus, it's never too late. It's never too late. And it's always time to bother Jesus. Because remember, church, he's always accessible, he's always available, and he's always going to be interruptible. He will always be available to hear you. He wants to be there for you. And so Jesus, overhearing what's being said, he tells Jairus, hey, Jairus, stop fearing and just keep on believing. It's like Journey's going to break out in a song right now, right? Just keep on believing. Replace your fear with faith. Somebody needs to hear that this morning. Replace your fear with faith, church. Jesus is going to raise the girl from the dead. When I see these two stories, when I see these two miracles, man, what I see is a deeply personal and relational Jesus. A deeply personal and relational God. I mean, Jesus could have left that poor woman alone. He just could have said, you know what? She got her healing. Fine, she got it. That's good. You know, she got what she came for, right? But he calls her out. Jesus wants more for you, more than you even want for yourself. Some of you guys think this is all I need. Jesus says, oh, this is not all you need. I've got so much more for you, right? And the same thing when he goes to Jairus. He didn't have to go to her house, his house. He just could have said, you asked, done. right? Jesus had the power. It's good. Just go home. Your daughter will be fine. I'm pretty busy right now. I got 10,000 people. I got more things to say. I got more things to do. But that's not the way Jesus operates. Jesus is an extremely personal Savior. He's very relational with you. If you've been to this church long enough, when we talk about our relationship with Jesus, we say, hey, I have a personal relationship with Jesus. I don't just go to church. I have a personal relationship with Jesus. That's the way we talk. And we need to adopt this attitude that this woman had. I mean, we need to adopt her mindset. I'm going to fight through the crowds, and I'm going to reach out for Jesus intentionally. Some of you guys, you've been hanging out in the crowd. Some of you guys, you've been sneaking into church. Some of you guys are just kind of part of the buzz, like, well, what's Jesus doing? This is pretty exciting. I want to hear more. I want to see more. But some of you guys need to take hold of Jesus. It's about time you said, you know what? I'm done looking, I'm done observing, and I want Jesus, and I want more. And that's what the woman did. I just want him, and I'm grabbing onto him. The miracle came when she grabbed onto him, when she clutched him, like she's going water skiing. I'm not letting go. Not letting go of that rope. Take me for this ride. You got to stop just moving with the crowd. And you know what? God knows where you're at. He knows what you're dealing with. If I can just go ahead and get the worship team back up here. God knows where you're at. And you need to know that He understands you. And He hears everything, and He knows everything. He knows that you have faith and unbelief. God, I believe you, but I have unbelief. God, help my unbelief. I'm one of those guys. I'm just wrapped up with faith and unbelief all the time. God, I believe, but help my unbelief. God, I believe, but are you really going to do this? I'm just wrapped up mess on the inside, right? Faith and unbelief just battling each other. Anybody else in that same room? Just faith and unbelief just banging against each other. But you know what I know? My doubts and my fears don't scare God. Amen. They scare me. They get me into a crazy space. But my doubts and my fears don't scare God. Your doubts and your fears don't scare Him. Church, He's bigger than all that. He's bigger than your doubts. He's bigger than your fears. He's bigger than your sickness. He's bigger than all the issues you've got. You can just go to Him. He is the God of all creation. He's bigger than those things. And He's calling you out. He says, son. He's calling you out and He's saying, daughter. Your faith has saved you. Your faith has healed you. We're going to go right back into worship right now. And I came across this song, I know by accident, or if Jules and one of these superstars that worship God better than I do brought it to me. But it's this song that's called Make Room. And so whenever I see Jules, she's getting ready to worship, I'm like, Jules, make room. I want you to sing that, make room. I think this song is going to be a response song for some of you out there in the courtyard. If you're watching online here in this chapel, this song is going to be a response song of saying, you know what? I'm not just going to sneak into the crowd anymore. I'm taking a hold of Jesus. I'm taking a hold of Jesus, and I need more. I need more than just a physical touch. I need a deeper personal relationship with you. It may not be the first time you do this. Maybe this is the 100th time you do this. I feel like I'm needing to grab onto Jesus every day. Every day I need to walk this out and say, Jesus, I die to myself, and I'm going to follow you. Because I know I'm going to raise myself from the dead, and I don't want to do that. I want to stay dead, and I want to live for you. So some of you guys this morning, in this song, make room. You can worship in silence as you're listening, as you're crying out, grabbing onto Jesus, or you can just sing it loud. Jesus, I make room for you. I'm going to grab onto you. Amen, church?